Touted as the greatest country in the history of the world, by many self-serving within the political class, many would argue that the great experiment that is the United States is faltering at best at home. But when looking at the trail of carnage, suffering, and death left in the wake of the great experiment abroad, it would be very difficult for even the most ardent of patriots to believe that the United States is an all-beneficent imperial overlord. And it is this month that marks perhaps one of the most odious of all American actions overseas that has long been explained away as a necessary evil meant to save both American and Japanese lives, and that is the atomic attacks on the civilian populations of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But is this foundational myth the case? Was the incineration of those cities by atomic fire necessary? Was Japan never going to surrender and ready to fight to the last man? And more importantly, what did those within the American military command structure during World War II think of the necessity of using the ultimate weapon on elderly men, on women, and on children? Hi everyone, just to let you know, I have some old favorites as well as new t-shirt designs on sale right now. Link to find them is in the description, and would like to thank you in advance, as it really does help the channel, as for years now, content like this has been put into an algorithmic black hole, as well as being demonetized. So thanks again, as well as I'm pretty sure you'll find something you will like.
We have heard that 500,000 children have died. I mean, that's more children than died in Hiroshima. And you know, is the price worth it?
I think this is a very hard choice, but we think the price is worth it.
In the aftermath of the First Persian Gulf War, former American first female Secretary of State, I should add, well, she believed that U.S. sanctions that caused the death of 500,000 Iraqi children was a price worth paying for American geopolitical strategic interests. Interestingly, the interviewer compares the sanction-induced deaths to the slaughter of children by the United States in Hiroshima. And more interestingly is that interview, which was made in 1996 on a major controlled media channel, has all but been wiped from the open internet, save reposts from a Turkish source. In October 2000, then Iraqi dictator Saddam Hussein switched his country's oil sales from dollars to euros. 2.5 years later, the United States invaded that country. And according to U.S. President George W. Bush and UK Prime Minister Tony Blair, the so-called coalition of the willing, well, their aims were to disarm Iraq's weapons of mass destruction, none of which were ever found, and to end Saddam Hussein's support of terrorism, support that he had never given, and of course to free the Iraqi people. However, of course, that freedom came at a price. According to estimates at Brown University, between 280,000 to 315,000 people died from direct war-related violence caused by the invasion. And as a side note, one of the first things the United States did upon its conquest of the country was to put Iraq's oil industry back into dollar denomination. In 2009, Colonel Muammar Gaddafi of Libya, then president of the African Union, suggested to the states of the African continent that they switch to a new currency independent of the American dollar, the gold dinar. However, by March 2011, then French President Nicolas Sarkozy reported that the Libyan leader was a threat to the financial security of the world, and NATO began military action in Libya in the name of humanitarian freedom. Colonel Gaddafi himself was murdered in the most grisly of ways that same year, and Libya, once one of the most stable and prosperous countries on the entire continent, was destroyed. And to this day, the United States led NATO's intervention in Libya under the pretext of defending freedom and democracy. Well, it produced a failed state and uncounted numbers of deaths. The lists of coups, assassinations, interventions, the list of sanction-related misery inflicted upon millions in nations around the world by the United States for geopolitical and economic hegemony under the banner of freedom and democracy is long and ironically unknown to most Americans. The reasons are long, but the key is that the interconnected nature of media and now big tech with the suppression of truth and distribution of establishment narratives. But what does all of this have to do with Hiroshima and Nagasaki and the incineration of their civilian populations by the United States in August 1945? Well, a couple of things going forward. I should say that I am myself an American citizen, and my own paternal grandfather fought in the Pacific Theater of World War II with the United States Navy. Also, for those that will be keen to pounce upon, I do live in Japan. But with that said, let's take a look at not only the state of the great experiment in the current year and its foreign relations with others, but also let's work our way back to those fateful days in August of 1945. An article of belief that has been in circulation since the atomic attacks on Hiroshima and Nagasaki and the incineration of their civilian populations is that these bombings were crucial for Japan's surrender and the preservation of American soldiers' lives. This perspective stands as lore, or a foundational myth within American history. Anyone that challenges this myth, like others within our contemporary society, are pounced upon and derided at best as fools and unpatriotic. But this underscores what was already known from intelligence intercepts between the Japanese foreign minister and its ambassador in Russia, that Japan was ready to surrender. This foundational myth is also at odds with what military leaders from that era believed. Now, what's important to understand is that, according to documentation at the time, that the Japanese High Command were not even aware that Hiroshima and Nagasaki perished in atomic fire, but they were under the assumption that they had been obliterated, as had dozens of other cities by conventional means, and that the real reason for the surrender by the Japanese was prompted by the Soviet entry into the war that was scheduled for August 9th, 1945, the day after the bombing of Nagasaki. The insights of others help us understand why President Truman was so adamant that the basically defeated Japanese must be incinerated in atomic fire in Nagasaki and Hiroshima, and those included Manhattan Project physicist Leo Szilard and his interactions with then Secretary of State. It was the use of the atomic bombs, and the reason for their use was that Russia might be more manageable in Eastern Europe if impressed by American military might, and that a demonstration of the bomb might impress Russia. Now, while the American foundational myth that the dropping of a single bomb from altitude that killed hundreds of thousands of civilians is morally justifiable, as it would save American military personnel, would the American people, as Ralph Racio in a 2009 article in antiwar.com, be just as supportive if it meant individually shooting these hundreds of thousands of men, women, and children for the same reason? Foundation myths are not only important as a way to unite people, but also a way to distract them, and as we are seeing in the current year, ways to attack those same people. America was founded as a republic, not as an empire. And while Americans are distracted at home by wedged domestic social issues, what is a woman? Drag time story hour. What is humane health care? Bump stocks and magazine capacities. Well, at home, they are also told, that is the American people, that the greatest efforts of American foreign policy are exporting LGBTQ rights and the values of multicultural societies. The real machinations of American hegemony have changed little since President Eisenhower's farewell address warning of the undue influence of the military-industrial complex. And this should give pause to anyone when considering the tens of billions, hundreds of billions of dollars that have been injected into the current NATO project in Ukraine and the mounting death toll and total destruction of that country. Is more death and destruction in the name of freedom and democracy in the interests of the people being slaughtered, or is this just more theater? This theater is probably best exemplified by the current spokesperson for the Ukrainian government for Western audiences, the American transgender individual Sarah Ashton Cirillo.
This is Sergeant Sarah Ashton Cirillo of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, and you're watching episode 19 of Russia Hates the Truth, a public service announcement focused on countering Russian lies and propaganda while bringing you the truth about Ukraine's war for liberty, direct from Kyiv. Do you know the difference between us and them? Besides fighting under this flag and for freedom on behalf of the people of Ukraine, while the Russians are fighting for tyranny and dictatorship, it's pretty simple. We're human, and those guys most definitely aren't. Slava Ukraini.
And if this isn't yet again theater masquerading behind slogans of freedom and democracy, I don't know what is. Thanks very much for watching. If you like this video, please check to see that you're still subscribed, as YouTube has unsubscribed tens of thousands of people without their knowledge or consent. If you'd like to help support this channel, it would be greatly appreciated, as it has been demonetized since 2019. And in doing so, you'll be able to join our weekly roundtable, among other perks. With that said, thank you again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.